probably do is concentrate a little bit more on the,
Okay. Taking the roll and ready when you are.
okay. Why don't we start off as we did with the other two individuals, and talk a little bit about your involvement in the program, your early involvement, and as it evolved. I think that would be useful.
When I first came to the office that ran the Corona program, I was very much on the periphery of the program. Given my tender age at the time, I was very much of a spare carrier, and one might say the first year I was a looky-loo to the Corona effort. My primary thrust in the Development Projects Division was to be the case officer for the U-2 pilots and also to direct the tech rep contracts to the U-2 program. And Corona was just in the nation stage at the time. We had just received presidential approval. And it wasn't until about a year after the program was started that I became the executive officer in that division, and that really got me involved in Corona to the extent where I could at least still sit in the cheap seats and go to the suppliers meetings and things like that.
How did your role evolve with time?
Well, as the Corona program got on and became successful, we obviously moved to improve the system in all aspects. So we had upgrades to the program. And then we realized that while Corona provided us good coverage from a photographic standpoint, the resolution was not what we would like it. So we decided to see what we could do to evolve the Corona program into a higher resolution system. And that's where I was really involved in that process of doing that. In fact, as years went by, we devoted a single office to just the satellite activity. And it was in that sense that we began to merge the high resolution with the wide area coverage that Corona offered.
What was the geopolitical environment at the beginning of the program that fostered the start of the program?
In those days, I think it takes a while to discipline oneself, given the current state of our technology, that in the late 50s and the early 60s, space was virgin territory. There was no knowledge of space. In fact, when you mention the word orbit, people wonder what you were talking about. And so we had two issues coming about. We had the evolution of technology to offer us the satellite photography, and Corona was certainly a pathfinder in that standpoint. But also politically, we had very little visibility into the Soviet Union at the time. The Berlin Wall hadn't been there, but the Iron Curtain certainly was. And if you may recall, it was the lack of knowledge of the Soviet Union that forced President Eisenhower to approve the U-2 program. And that was a rather courageous step for a president of the United States to authorize overflights over the Soviet Union. At that time, we thought that maybe the U-2 might last 2 years. Actually, it lasted a little over 4. But what that time span did was permit us to begin to develop a database on what was going on in the Soviet Union. We were able to solve the bomber gap through the U-2, and our eyes were open as to what Soviets were doing with their nuclear facilities. The United States was still very fearful of the Soviet Union and what they were trying to do. and the missile gap was certainly very much on our mind. With the advent of technology to suggest that we could move into using satellites to overfly the Soviet Union, we could get away from this political baggage that every U-2 flight brought upon us. And sure enough, Corona came along, and it began to bring home a wealth of information on the Soviet Union. And Washington was a sponge. Whatever Corona brought back was absorbed into the Washington scene with great enthusiasm, because our knowledge was so limited. And so Corona really opened new vistas for us, not only in getting a feel for what was happening throughout the Soviet Union, but it also began to bring a focus to our requirements so that we can then go after these intelligence targets, as well as military targets, with a great deal of preciseness and precision.
Good. I think that's going to be very helpful.
That's great.
That's excellent. One of the questions the other two people have talked about, some of the factors that contributed to the early success of the program. Is that something you'd like to comment on, or?
The early success of the program was really an attribute of the vision that the highest leaders in the United States had. This was a program that was devised from the top down. And it is amazing when one stops to think that here we were trespassing on technology territory that was unknown to mankind, let alone the United States. And when you have the President of the United States pushing for a program, it gives you a great deal of latitude in the aggressiveness with which you pursue it. Corona, unlike any other program I have known in the intelligence world, enjoyed not only the daily interest of the President of the United States, but you had the Secretary of Defense, the Director of Central Intelligence, and a number of key people all throughout the Air Force very much committed to giving a go at this program. And it was their enthusiasm, their endorsement, and their support, as well as their vision, that permitted the program managers, both within the contractor corps as well as the government corps, the latitude to proceed without fear of failure. And the Lord knows that Corona had its fair share of failure, because it was opening new vistas on every form of technology. And sure enough, there were failures, and while the President Eisenhower may have gotten testy from time to time with these failures, he still endorsed the program, and it permitted folks like Dick Bissell and General Ozzie Ritlin to stand tall to keep the program going, and it sure did, and it paid off.
Any other areas that, mining some good gold here. A lot of these other questions that we,
How about one that says, as a very young spear carrier in the program, did you have any idea that it would evolve to what you saw in your senior position later on as a real contributor to national policy
and how it would even impact future programs?
the perspective change
Sure.
that you personally went through from here to here as you viewed the program?
As I witnessed the Corona program evolve, it didn't take a rocket scientist to realize that satellite photography was going to become a core of our intelligence portfolio. And once Corona flew and brought back that first photography in August 1960, it changed the entire intelligence community to the point where at no time would we want to do with anything less. And the satellite photography then won its spurs and was going to become a part of how we thought about satisfying intelligence requirements and policymaker needs. And as we watched Corona evolve, we knew that it was just the first step in a long road of technology that was going to make intelligence much easier, much better, and give the policymaker what he needed.
It's really nice.
Any humorous anecdotes or stories that haven't come out yet?
None that I can speak of here.
Your wife would iron for you.
Oh, don't worry about this little kid.
It's just between us.
Yeah.
As Connie Chung would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think about 90% of what we've got here is good take.
Absolutely.
I
Oh,
actually
yeah,
have
excellent.
stars next to about 9 things you said already, meaning fantastic, useful quotes,
Good.
great information.
Okay.
Let's, maybe one thing we haven't touched on a personal side, and as far as heroes, the people that really made the program work, maybe from your visibility, certainly at the Washington level, you talked about the Bissell's and Ritlands. How about program office, workers?
Well, I think that when you review the program and the success for the program, I think everybody in the aerospace industry always refers to team effort. And when they speak favorably about a team, it usually means that the program has been successful. And Corona was indeed successful, and it did have a super team right from the very start. I don't think anyone ever identified with their parochial interest on the Corona program. Right from the get-go, that was a program for the United States, and it drew in CIA, the Air Force, DOD, ARPA in early days, and the contractor corps. And they did operate as a cohesive team. Their job was to give the United States a capability it needed very badly, and they did so. And it was only in later years that when we were so-called organized, that there was fraying in the ranks, so to speak, not in the upper direction of the program, but the different rice bowls that then began to develop within the bureaucracy began to tilt with one another. And this is where I think contractors really paid off, because I can recall at one point in time when we were really battling with the Air Force as to who would run the Air Force or the Corona contracts, particularly dealing with the payload and the reentry vehicles. The Air Force, or some folks in the Air Force, felt that they ought to run it. And they offered Lockheed at the time, which was integrating the payload and providing the Agena spacecraft, a contract that was comparable to the contract that CIA had with Lockheed. And Lockheed did an amazing thing. They sent the contract back saying that the Lockheed Corporation would carry on this program until the government could get its act together. And Lockheed had two different contracts at the time, and I think they put about $2 million in one and $1.5 million in the second, before indeed Washington got together, sorted it out, and we went on to what I think has been a very harmonious relationship between the agencies of government ever since. And that to me is a good indication of the team effort that went into bringing the government and the contractor corps together and satisfying the national need.
Right, good. I think I'm out of questions. Bill, anyone else?
Maybe
try to get the three together and
Yeah.
let you have some of that
Okay.
interaction before Dr. Oder has to leave.
How you gonna do that?
I don't know.
Well, we have 3 microphones, we're gonna just clear you out for a few minutes,
Okay.
and then we'll set up